We read headlines, we study history, we think we know. But what happens when the story we've been told was not the whole story? In this episode, we travel from the heart of the Congo to the center of our own assumptions. The Poisonwood Bible shows us how easy it is to misunderstand a place when you arrive with answers instead of questions. King Leopold's ghost uncovers the brutal legacy behind one of the most devastating colonial regimes in Africa. And Cobalt Red brings us to the present, into the mines beneath our modern lives, where the true cost of progress is buried deep. This isn't just about what happened over there. It's about how we see, what we miss, and the illusions we carry when we think we already understand. Welcome to Gateway Books by Crestance, where fiction meets history, and where every story is an invitation to look more closely. I'm Cindy Cruz, and in this episode, we're exploring how faraway places aren't always as distant as they seem, and how events we may barely know about are often woven into the fabric of our daily lives. We begin with The Poisonwood Bible, a novel that unravels the consequences of cultural certainty and good intentions imposed from the outside. We'll move from there into King Leopold's Ghost, which traces the devastating legacy of colonial exploitation in the Congo. And finally, into Cobalt Red, a present-day account of labor, suffering, and silence beneath the technologies we depend on. Gateway Books is part of Crestance, a space for bold ideas expressed with care. If these stories move you to think more deeply or see differently, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and explore more at crestance.com. Let's begin. Barbara Kingsolver's The Poisonwood Bible is many things at once. A literary epic, a political critique, a family saga. But at its core, it's a meditation on the limit of perspective. Told through the voices of 5 women, the wife and daughters of evangelical missionary Nathan Price, it traces their experiences in the Congo in the early 1960s, just as the country begins its painful, turbulent transition from Belgian colony to independent nation. When the Price family arrives in Kilanga, they bring with them seeds, sermons, and an unshakable certainty that they are there to help. Nathan is rigid, devout, and unrelenting. His mission is not one of dialogue or exchange, but of transformation. He intends to change the Congo, whether it wants to be changed or not. The tragedy of this approach unfolds slowly, but inevitably, and Kingsolver never lets us forget that good intentions, when rooted in arrogance, can be just as destructive as outright malice. What makes the Poisonwood Bible resonate so deeply is its layered narrative voice and moral complexity. Rather than offering a single lens, Kingsolver invites us to inhabit 5 distinct interior worlds. Rachel, the eldest daughter, clings to her American identity with ironic detachment and cultural superiority. Leah, driven by fierce loyalty and idealism, gradually awakens to the cost of her father's convictions. Ada, who is silent but perceptive, sees everything others overlook. And Ruth May, the youngest, offers brief moments of innocence that carry quiet foreboding. Their mother, Orleana, narrates in retrospect, weighted by memory and quiet grief, aware of all that was lost and that she failed to prevent. Importantly, the Congolese characters are not reduced to props in a Western story. They are fully present, embodied, opinionated, resistant, and wise in ways the Prices struggle to recognize. Kingsolver does not cast them as exotic scenery or passive recipients of foreign intervention. Their dignity is not in question. It simply exists, whether the Prices acknowledge it or not. The novel's title itself is a quiet warning. The poisonwood tree, misnamed and mishandled by Nathan, becomes a symbol of linguistic failure, cultural arrogance, and the harm caused when we impose our frameworks on unfamiliar soil. He insists on baptizing children in crocodile-infested waters, despite local warnings. He plants crops that won't grow. He preaches sermons no one understands. His presence becomes not a blessing, but a rupture. At every turn, the novel challenges the assumption that arrival equals insight. The Prices come with a worldview shaped by their own history and belief system. They see what they expect to see and miss everything else. Yet slowly, through pain and reckoning, some of them begin to notice what was always there: the intelligence, resilience, and complexity of the place they entered. The broader political shifts of the time, Patrice Lumumba's rise and fall, Belgian and American interference, Mobutu's rise are not distant abstractions. They ripple directly through Kilanga, through the Price's lives, and through the voices of the daughters as they narrate. Kingsolver doesn't isolate the personal from the political. She reveals how intimately they are connected, especially in a place where outside powers have long shaped internal realities. Among the daughters, it is Leah whose transformation feels the most profound. Once loyal to her father and full of missionary zeal, she becomes disillusioned, not only with Nathan's theology, but with the very idea of moral authority imposed from afar. She stays, she learns, she marries into the community. Her journey reflects a move from assumption to humility, from speaking over to listening in. The novel quietly but firmly asks us to examine how we enter stories that are not our own. What do we think we know? Who taught us that version? And what gets left out when we see only through our own lens? Perhaps what lingers most is the slow dismantling of certainty. The Poisonwood Bible doesn't offer easy answers or clean resolutions. Instead, it opens a space for discomfort, for the recognition that understanding is not a destination, but a process shaped by time, attention, and humility. It reminds us that proximity is not the same as knowledge, and that narrative control often lies in the hands of those least qualified to wield it. As we turn next to King Leopold's ghost, we will shift from the story of a single family to the machinery of the empire itself. But the thread remains: how outside forces enter, interpret, and extract, often without ever truly seeing what's in front of them. If the Poisonwood Bible shows us the consequences of cultural imposition on a personal level, King Leopold's Ghost reveals the machinery behind it. Adam Hochschild's landmark work pulls back the curtain on one of the most brutal colonial regimes in modern history: the exploitation of the Congo Free State under the personal rule of King Leopold II of Belgium. Between 1885 and 1908, millions of Congolese people were killed, mutilated, or displaced in the name of civilization and profit. The atrocities committed under Leopold's rule, forced labor, hostage-taking, torture, and widespread killings were driven by the global demand for ivory and rubber. The veneer of benevolence covered a system designed not to uplift or educate, but to extract and dominate. And for years, the world looked away. Hochschild's achievement lies in the way he reconstructs this forgotten, or more accurately, ignored, history. He traces not only the decisions made in royal halls and corporate boardrooms, but also the strategies of silence and distraction that allowed the horrors in the Congo to continue for so long without widespread outrage. Leopold, from a distance, crafted an image of himself as a philanthropist and modernizer. He established sham humanitarian associations. He orchestrated press campaigns. And he shaped a narrative that made it possible for people across Europe and the United States to believe that the Congo was being developed under his care. The truth was far more chilling. Local populations were terrorized into harvesting rubber under impossible quotas. Those who failed to meet their targets were punished, often by the cutting off of the hands, a practice that became horrifyingly a symbol of the regime. Villages were burned, families were broken, and entire regions were left scarred by a violence that would echo into the future. What makes King Leopold's ghost especially relevant is how clearly it exposes the role of distance in perpetuating injustice. Leopold never set foot in the territory he ruled. His hands were clean, technically, but his wealth, reputation, and national legacy were built on the suffering of people he never met. In that way, the Congo Free State becomes a devastating example of what happens when control is exerted from afar, with little understanding and even less accountability. The illusion of good intentions returns here, but on a far larger and more calculating scale. While Leopold's propaganda framed his rule as a humanitarian project, what he orchestrated was one of the most violent and economically exploitative systems of the 19th century. The so-called civilizing mission was not a moral endeavor, but a profitable enterprise, wrapped in the language of progress. And yet, within this history, Hochschild also brings to light the voices of resistance. Figures like George Washington Williams, an African American journalist who exposed the early abuses of the Congo. E.D. Morel, a British shipping clerk turned human rights activist. And Roger Casement, an Irish diplomat who documented the atrocities firsthand. These individuals challenged the empire not from a place of distance, but through direct witness and moral conviction. Still, it's worth noting that even their efforts, though courageous and crucial, were constrained by their own positions and limitations. And there's a lesson in that too, that even the best intentions, when shaped by the logic of imperial systems, can only go so far. Dismantling those systems requires more than exposés. It demands that we listen to the people most affected, not just those speaking on their behalf. What King Leopold's ghost does so effectively is break the spell of abstraction. It names the people who suffered, identifies the men who profited, and traces the quiet complicity of a world that benefited from violence while claiming ignorance. It invites us to confront not only the facts of history, but the frameworks through which those facts were once justified and obscured. As we move forward into Cobalt Red, we carry with us not just the legacy of what happened more than a century ago, but the deeper question: how much has really changed? When global markets drive extraction, when wealth is built on invisible suffering, and when consumers benefit without seeing the human cost, what does that say about what we've learned? History, Hochschild reminds us, is not past. It's present. It's embedded in institutions, economies, and attitudes. And if we're not paying attention, we may find ourselves repeating the same patterns, only under different names. If King Leopold forces us to confront the atrocities of the past, Cobalt Red brings us face to face with their present-day echo. Less visible, perhaps, but no less devastating. In Siddharth Kara's investigative work, the Congo reappears, not as a case study in imperial ambition, but at the heart of our modern digital economy. Cobalt, an essential mineral for rechargeable batteries, powers everything from smartphones and laptops to electric vehicles. And more than 70% of the world's cobalt is mined in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. What Kara documents in Cobalt Red is not simply the environmental or economic dimension of this industry, but the human one. In harrowing detail, he uncovers the lives of Congolese children and families who labor in hand-dug pits, often without safety equipment, without fair compensation, and with no legal representation. These are not isolated abuses. They are systemic. Behind the clean marketing of green energy lies a supply chain steeped in danger, exploitation, and silence. Children dig with their bare hands. Entire communities are displaced by industrial operations. And when injuries occur, or deaths, there is little recourse. The same international forces that once extracted rubber and ivory now extract cobalt. The faces of the buyers have changed. The mechanisms of violence have evolved, but the logic, the disposability of human life in pursuit of wealth remains chillingly familiar. What makes Cobalt Red so urgent is its unflinching clarity. Carrot doesn't allow us to intellectualize the issue or file it away under abstract geopolitical concerns. He brings us into the tunnels, into the homes of families living beside toxic waste, into the voices of those who say again and again that they have no choice. His research is grounded in first-hand testimony. Brave, vulnerable, stories told at great risk. These stories demand not just awareness, but accountability. The connection to colonial history is not theoretical. Many of the mines operate in areas where King Leopold's rubber operations once stood. The language of extraction has changed from overt domination to corporate outsourcing, but the underlying structures, foreign ownership, minimal regulation, local disempowerment, persist. The Congo remains rich in resources and poor in justice. It is still a place where outsiders arrive with profit in mind and leave the consequences behind. What Cobalt Red forces us to consider is how embedded we are in this system. It's easy to condemn historical atrocities from the comfort of hindsight. It's far harder to look down at a phone, at a laptop, at an electric car, and ask, at what cost? And this is where the theme sharpens into focus. So often, we look at global issues from a comfortable distance. We diagnose problems from afar. We suggest solutions in the abstract. But Cobalt Red reminds us that when it comes to injustice, distance is a luxury and sometimes a disguise. It allows us to benefit without reckoning, to speak without listening, to act without consequence. Carrot doesn't moralize, he documents, but his documentation is a form of moral clarity. He names companies, he names the villages, he names the patterns. And in doing so, he collapses the space between their problem and our world. There is a line repeated in Cobalt Red. This is the cost of convenience. That line stays with you. It's not an accusation, it's a reckoning. Because once you've read these stories, convenience no longer feels neutral. It feels weighted, charged, complicated. The point is not guilt, it's recognition. Cobalt Red doesn't ask us to abandon technology or disengage from global markets. It asks us to see, to understand, to question the systems we take for granted and the stories we've been told about progress. And perhaps most importantly, it reminds us that solutions don't begin with distant analysis or idealized policy. They begin with listening, truly listening, to the people whose lives are shaped by these systems every day. That's where understanding lives. That's where any meaningful change begins. There's a comfort in believing we know the world, that with enough reading, enough thought, we can hold the truth at a safe distance and still understand it. But the books we've explored today resist that kind of comfort. They remind us that what seems far away is often intimately near, hidden not by geography, but by habit, history, and willful unawareness. The Poisonwood Bible exposed what happens when people arrive in another country thinking they already understand it. Not out of malice, but out of certainty, out of the belief that conviction is the same as clarity. King Leopold's ghost revealed how that same certainty, when wielded as policy and power, can devastate entire nations, and how narratives of progress can mask structures of violence. And Cobalt Red brought us into the present, where the extraction never stopped, it just changed its language. The tools are different, but the hands are still digging, and many of them are still bleeding. Each of these stories asks us to do something difficult, to stop looking from a distance and to start paying attention up close, not only to what is visible, but to what has been systematically obscured. They ask us to question what we think we know, to confront the ease of our own lives, and to sit with the discomfort of realizing that the comforts we enjoy are often built on costs we haven't personally paid. That realization can be paralyzing, but it can also be a beginning. Not of grand solutions or sweeping gestures, but of smaller, quieter shifts in how we listen, how we buy, how we speak, and how we resist the urge to narrate someone else's experience from above. Maybe the first step is not to speak, but to see, not to fix, but to face, not to carry the story, but to let the story carry us into a deeper, harder, truer understanding. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Gateway Books by Crestance. If this conversation stirred something in you, if it made you pause, question, or see differently, I hope you'll carry that feeling with you. These stories don't end when the episode does. They echo in what we choose to notice, what we choose to ask, and how we choose to live. To keep exploring, visit crestance.com, where you'll find thoughtfully designed gear, gifts, and journals created for readers who want to go deeper. If you haven't yet, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who believes stories can shape how we see the world. Until next time, read bravely, think deeply, and thank you for being here.